Hey, Zane here. So, since say the 1950s, the obesity rate in the United States has tripled. So, in the 50s, it was somewhere between 5 to 10% of the U.S. population. Now, we're around 30. We float around 30%. So something's changed. What's changed? I mean, we're exercising more than ever, right? It's obvious. We have people running 10Ks, marathons, doing CrossFit, doing these challenge races where they're doing all these obstacle races. People are exercising more than ever. Greater percent of our population is exercising. We're going to gyms. That was not the case in the 50s. People didn't do those things. They weren't walking around like fitness models. Okay, they're not doing these workouts that people are doing. You see everywhere in group, whether it's group classes. That just wasn't a thing. That was not a thing at all. So we're exercising more than ever. We're moving more than ever, and yet we're fatter than ever as a population. And people struggle. People's doing these races and going to the classes, struggling to lose weight, to maintain just a general level of fitness, not trying to be fitness models, and yet they're struggling. They can't do it. Something's happening. Something's wrong. They're not making progress in many cases. Not in every case, but in many cases, they're not seeing the results of all this activity. So what has changed? I think what we have to look at is our diet. Two main things have changed since the 50s. One, on average, in the 1950s and 60s and even into the 70s, average person ate 3 meals a day. And that's it. They didn't snack between meals. They weren't eating every 2 or 3 hours by any means. And most of their meals were within a 12-hour period. So they might have eaten breakfast at, say, 7. And dinner was usually wrapped up by 7. People came home from work, they had dinner right away, and they were done eating. When they were done eating, they stopped eating. Okay? So in general, on average, this is statistical, 3 meals, not a bunch of snacking. Whereas you look at the 2000s, I think it was 2003 when they did the statistic, it was an average of 6 times a day. People were eating an average of 6 times a day. All hours spread out all over the place, from morning to late night. We're eating too often. And that constant eating, that eating all the time leads to, who's making a meal 6 times a day? Nobody. They're eating snack food. They're eating processed snack food. It's a huge industry. You get it everywhere. It looks healthy. The wrapper says it's healthy. You read the ingredients, it kind of sounds healthy. So let's just keep eating it every 2 or 3 hours. That's a major change. That's a major change. If we're eating average 6 times a day, that sounds like a major change. The other thing is in the mid 50s, 60s, 70s, we had a more balanced diet. We had a more balance of fat, protein, and carbs. They weren't eating low carb by any means, but they ate less carbs and more fat because it was a balanced diet. Until the late 70s and the early 80s, we started getting the recommendations to cut fat out of the diet, cut dietary fat, which means we have to increase carbohydrates. Carbohydrates were considered safe, carte blanche. Eat more carbs, eat less fat. Okay, and if you're eating less fat, you're kind of cut out animal proteins, eggs, meat, so less protein, more carbs, to the point that the American Heart Association was actually giving out, sponsorships for things like Cocoa Puffs, Frosted Mini Wheats, getting the blue check. We go on Instagram, we all want the blue check on Instagram, right? The celebrity symbol. And people are willing to pay for that or do what they need to do to get that. Well, people in the 80s, foods would get sponsorships from the American Heart Association for to pay $7,500 per food item to get that blue check on there. Cocoa Puffs, Frosted Mini Wheats, that's healthy. That's good for you. That won't cause diabetes or heart disease. But, heaven forbid it should be, on something like eggs or fish, meat. It was an industry. But when we cut back the fat, we had no choice. We had to go to the carbs. And the carbs became not veggies. They weren't eating veggies. They weren't eating more legumes or sweet potatoes, are they? No. They're eating the starchy stuff. They're eating the wheat, the soybean stuff, the sugar. And it became quite an industry, adding to the snack food effect of eating more often. So those two things, in my opinion, seem to have really ramped up. If you look at from the 1980s, the obesity rates going straight up. And now why? Because those two things cause an increase in insulin. Eating more often, you get a bump in insulin every time you eat. If insulin's up, you're not burning fat. If you're only allowing 2 or 3 hours between meals, it's a lot less time to be burning fat. If you're eating all hours of the day over a 15, 16 hour period throughout the day, again, less time when you're fasted overnight. More carbs means more insulin. Again, high insulin, less fat burning, or more likely to become insulin resistant, leading to diabetes, heart disease, and just weight gain in general. When you're insulin resistant, you're bypassing muscles. Muscles are saying, hey, we're done. No more here, no more room here. Take it to the fat. Take the fat cells, store in the fat cells. So those two things alone add to fat storage and limit fat burning. Now, I know this might sound new to you. If it does, feel free to post in the comments below. I know we've been hearing for decades now, eat small meals more often. It's not working for us, folks. It's not working. I don't do it anymore. I used to tell people that. I don't do it anymore. I don't tell people that anymore because it doesn't work. It's just making people bigger, fatter, more insulin resistant. So again, any questions, please post them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer them. If you know someone that might benefit from hearing this because they've been hearing all of basically the false dogma for all these last decades, tag them in the comments below. I'd love to answer their questions as well. Talk to you later.